Of course you have to come with me. Siddle said as if it was a matter of course. She glanced at Belch, and asked strangely, "Are you planning to let me drive for 6 hours alone?" Belch. He only dared to mumble in response, ran to contact the auto repair shop, and drove the car out of the garage. The blonde girl carrying the suitcase stood at the intersection. After the storm, countless trees had fallen. From a distance, everything looked like a mess. After the storm, the sky was sunny again. The location in the center of town was relatively safe. From the mountain road looking down, one could see the houses on the edge of the forest and traces of damaged trees. Belch drove to the intersection, and saw Siddle walking out of the supermarket with a large bag of groceries. She put the groceries in the trunk, and asked Belch casually, "Is it dangerous?" Belch swore, "Don't worry, the car has always been regularly inspected and maintained every year, so there are no problems." Siddle nodded, said nothing more, got into the passenger seat and buckled his seatbelt. Belch got in too. He started the car and turned on the radio. Today's weather forecast in Derry: temperature, 17°C, humidity, 60%, partly cloudy, sunny, light wind. It'll rain heavily early this morning, but the sky will be clear during the day. The car drove smoothly, taking the two of them out of town. However, as we all know, weather forecasts are not very accurate anywhere. After driving for about 3 hours, a heavy rainstorm came. Dark clouds rolled in, and in an instant the sky darkened as if it was about to collapse. Large raindrops as big as beans rhythmically hit the windows, and on the flat road, the rainwater that hadn't had time to drain flowed down in torrents. Belch slowed down, and saw the blonde girl beside him, wearing only a beige sleeveless dress, hugging her arms and muttering a few complaints. "The weather where you guys are is really weird." Siddle was almost unbearably cold. She reached for her bulging backpack in the back seat, her hands trembling as she took out a fluffy blanket, and wrapped herself into a ball of fur. Then she continued to huddle in the passenger seat, looking at the gloomy road ahead, and because she was so bored, she could only chat with her younger brother beside her. "Can I complain to your Derry weatherman? If it weren't for the sunny weather forecast, I wouldn't have chosen to leave today." She looked out the window, her eyes reflecting the pouring rain. Siddle closed her eyes, hiding the worry in her blue eyes. A big storm might not come here, but a rainstorm, that was uncertain. No one knew when this rain would stop and whether a big event like last night would happen. Belch glanced at Siddle. The blonde girl was curled up in a soft blanket, only revealing her small, snow-white face. Because she was warm, her eyelashes trembled slightly, seemingly struggling with sleepiness. He felt that Siddle had become a different person since she defeated the clown and prepared to leave last night. Although she was still arrogant and domineering, she was also much gentler. Belch thought for a moment and said, "Sister, if you're sleepy, then take a nap first." After all, the distance from here to the airport was only a little over 2 hours. There probably wouldn't be any more accidents. Siddle suddenly became alert. She glanced at Belch warily. No. There was only a little more time. Now Siddle just wanted to keep an eye on Belch, make sure he didn't make any mistakes, so she could get home as soon as possible. The car drove a little further. The rain poured down and tended to become more and more intense. The sky was getting darker and darker. It was clearly noon, but the surroundings were as dark as midnight. Reaching out he couldn't see anything, only 2 car headlights flashing in the darkness. This was clearly a highway, but there were only weeds growing wildly along the road. There were no other vehicles or people on the road. The atmosphere was getting more and more stifling. No one spoke in the car. The sound of pouring rain rang in his ears. Belch only felt extremely bored. Although he was driving according to the navigation system, he now felt as if he was driving to some unknown place. Belch was frightened by his own thoughts. He pursed his lips uneasily, silently praying in his heart that nothing would happen. However, according to Murphy's Law, the worst situation always happened unexpectedly. Siddle was a little hungry. She turned around to get some food from the backpack in the back seat, took out a sandwich for herself, but when she turned around, the car suddenly stopped. She looked at the chicken sandwich in her hand and remembered that she didn't bring much fast food, so she reluctantly gave Belch a cookie. Belch didn't pay any attention. He frowned, looking at the navigation map uneasily. After a while, Belch said, "Sister, we can't go forward for now." He pointed at the map, and a red mark appeared 5 kilometers ahead. The warning information shows that due to the storm, there has been a landslide along the side of XX Avenue, blocking the exit. We have no way to leave this highway. Siddle. Her expression turned cold, and she glanced at the map in a bad mood. Did they say how long it will take to leave? The news from the city center said that they are urgently summoning workers to clear the road, but they didn't give a specific time for the road to be cleared. After all, it's raining so hard, it's not safe to repair the road now. Belch looked at the map again and hesitantly said, "We only have 3 options right now." Siddle, speak. She opened the sandwich bag and took a bite as she replied. Although the current situation seemed bad, she still needed to have lunch. Siddle didn't want to be hungry when dealing with emergencies. Belch pointed at the map. "There's a scenic spot called Crystal Lake next to us. I just looked it up in the Crystal Lake travel guide. There are some places with high terrain that won't be flooded by rain. We can go there and set up camp for the night first." "Siddle, this won't work." She waved her hand, signaling Belch to propose the next solution. Belch scratched his head awkwardly. "This is the best way. There's a tent in the trunk, we can totally wait." The blonde girl chewed on the sandwich with an expressionless face. Last week or so, there were only a dozen or so people at Crystal Lake. Although the report used the word missing, the people who disappeared at Crystal Lake have not been found. However, the local police and tourists are still convinced that those people just disappeared by accident. "Belch," he replied in a low voice, "then this method won't work." He stretched out his finger and drew a circle on the map. "Secondly, we can also take a detour. If we go through this area, we can completely go around that blocked road." Siddle looked at the area he passed through in confusion. "Isn't this area unmapped on GPS? In other words, this is a place where even GPS can't provide the police with your exact location even if you report it." "Belch, that's right, this should be a forest, but it should be possible to drive in there." Siddle shook his head. "This method won't work either. Even GPS doesn't have any information. How do you know if there's anything hidden in there?" "Belch, all right." The teenager lowered his head dejectedly. "The third way. We can only wait in the car." "Siddle." She raised her small flashlight and shined it out the window. A beam of white light shone into an unknown dark area. The trees were wet and drooping down on the side of the road, and the grass was overgrown. There was an old, dilapidated wooden signboard by the side of the road, on which were some words written in white paint that had faded and were not clearly visible. She looked around, heard the sound of rushing water. The water had already reached half of the car's tire. Looking out the back window, she couldn't see the end of the road clearly, only endless darkness. Siddle put away the flashlight. "Can we go back the way we came now?" Belch hesitated for a moment and then replied in a low voice, "Probably not." He pointed to the red line on the road behind him on the map. "The road behind us is also blocked by mud. But the road behind isn't that important. The city government probably won't deal with it soon. They'll definitely fix the road ahead first." Siddle. "Very good, all the way out is blocked." She rubbed her forehead and said in a low voice, "Don't stop here." No one knew when the rain would stop, and whether it would get heavier or not, or even, the storm could turn this car into scrap. Siddle thought about it for a while. "Let's just keep driving forward." Belch hesitated. "Let's keep driving forward." He hesitantly said, "Sister, why don't I get out and take a look around?" Belch opened the car door with an umbrella. Siddle thought for a moment and didn't stop her, only giving one instruction. "Don't go towards Crystal Lake, and don't go too far, just stay within my sight." Belch turned around to signal that it was clear, took 2 steps forward in the calf-deep water. When to the left was the Crystal Lake campsite, he thought for a moment then circled around the front of the car and went to the right. On the right was a wooden sign. Belch tried to look closely, still couldn't see what was written on it. Behind the wooden sign, the road was hidden by the forest and not too steep. Belch tried to take a few more steps, then slipped and fell to the ground. He tried to stand up in pain, the flashlight beam shone forward. Belch looked down and suddenly froze. Below the slope, in the valley, in front of him appeared a giant pit full of corpses. The corpses thrown here were not human corpses but animal corpses. After these animals were killed and dismembered, the bloody flesh was exposed under the flashlight. Flies and mosquitoes were buzzing around, and there were also larvae clinging densely to the corpses, which the rain couldn't wash away. Belch was stunned on the spot, and started vomiting. While he was vomiting, he suddenly heard the rumbling sound of a car approaching. Two beams of dazzling light from the car's headlights shone from not far away. An old, dilapidated truck was moving forward in the heavy rain, and the headlights still had blood stains on them. Before Belch could put away the flashlight, a man in ragged clothes opened the car door and got out. He opened the trunk door and dragged out a human being, throwing him into the animal carcass pit like trash. Belch's eyes widened in horror, and he subconsciously wanted to turn off the flashlight, but the switch was a bit slippery due to the rain. Not only did he fail to turn it off, his hands trembled and he dropped the flashlight on the ground, rolling down the slope into the pit of corpses. The man in the pit of corpses below picked up the flashlight and looked at Belch. There were still dried blood stains on his wet clothes. Belch! Exclamation point. Oh no, I've been discovered.